Greetings. This is an important planetary forecast that highlight the Uranus Station from retrograde, the annular solar eclipse, and the long-awaited grand conjunction of Neptune and Saturn, all taking place in the month of February of 2026. It must be noted that the period between February 16 through 20 will be the highlight for the month. The Sun will square Uranus on February 16. The following day, the annular solar eclipse will take place on the same day of the Uranus-Mercury-Sun planetary alignment, and then the grand conjunction of Neptune and Saturn will be taking place on February 20th, 2026. This serious convergence over this 4-day period of the annular solar eclipse with major planetary geometries should initiate significant geophysical events felt here on the Earth. This video will highlight key planetary drivers that could be foreshadows for major disturbances felt throughout the month. The slow-moving convergence of both Neptune and Saturn were moving into conjunction in July of 2025 and got within 1.5 arc minutes of each other. But both planets then went retrograde in July and then separated, and finally the long-awaited conjunction is about to be taking place in February of 2026, where both planets will make their 36-year conjunction, and the last time this occurred was in 1989. We're now focusing on the important astronomical events for the month. The lunar apogee takes place on February 10, February 17 the annular solar eclipse, and followed up by a powerful Mercury which will making a lunar conjunction on the 18th, and then perihelion on the 19th, and greatest elongation also on the same day. So Mercury will be extremely amplified just after the annual solar eclipse. The Moon-Saturn conjunction on the 19th, the powerful Neptune-Saturn conjunction, then the lunar perigee takes place on the 24th, and the Moon-Jupiter conjunction towards the end of the month on the 27th of February. We're now looking at the important lunar aspects taking place for the month and looking for simultaneous interactions. We'll get that 5 times throughout the month. The key period will be from the 18th through 19th in terms of lunar influence. We get the Moon-Venus, Moon-Mercury conjunctions within 15 hours on the 18th, and the following day Saturn-Neptune will be within 11 minutes of separation just prior to the Neptune-Saturn conjunction. We're now focusing on the important planetary alignments for the month, and we only get 2 geocentric alignments throughout February. The important Neptune-Saturn conjunction on the 20th, and on the 28th Mercury will be conjoining Venus. But Uranus will be a huge player this month as it makes 3 important planetary squares, with Venus on the 8th, Sun on the 16th and Mars on the 27th. So the Uranus geometry will be extremely important throughout February and will be a huge player in terms of geophysical events. We're now looking at the important lunar perigee information for the month. We have a look closely. February marks the Moon's 14th closest approach to the Earth for the year, or an anti-supermoon. Will be the Moon's farthest point of its orbit of the Earth at perigee, so the lunar influence will be considered extremely weak. As mentioned, the lunar influence will be quite weak. The lunar perigee comes at the 24th of the month, just 4 days after the major planetary alignment. If we have a look at the direct overhead longitudinal position at perigee of the Moon, it's focused over Iceland, stretching in towards the mid-Atlantic ridge, Central Americas and then South Americas. These will be the key areas of focus towards the second half of the month in terms of lunar perigee influence. We also need to look at the lunar declinations. Both of them on the 12th and 25th have an interesting hypersymmetry, sharing over the Central Americas, Iceland and then at high latitude Southern Hemisphere. While on the 25th, the day after the important lunar perigee, we have a similar occurrence of the lunar declination focused over the same area in the globe, and that is the Atlantic Ocean, the mid-Atlantic ridge, the periphery of the Central Americas, and then stretching down towards the high latitudes of the Southern Hemisphere around the South Sandwich Islands, Drake Passage, and also the regions of Scotia Sea. Now going to be talking about the X 1.9 class solar flare that took place on January 18 and its implications as to what it may be foreshadowing for February of 2026. Now this X-class solar flare took place while in an Earth-facing position, and the eruption itself sent out a very significant coronal mass ejection, fast-moving, that impacted Earth just 25 hours later. Now the significance of a solar rotation of 24 hours and a 25-hour arrival time involves the Moon. When you consider that both Sun and Moon were pretty much in their conjunction a month prior to the solar eclipse, should give us an interesting idea as to what to expect in the month of February. Now if we look specifically at the Sun direct overhead position at the time of the X-class solar flare, we can see it just west of South America and just offshore, and stretching the longitude line up, we can see it extends through central North America. 25 hours later, the arrival of the CME, an impact, a significant impact, one of the strongest solar storms since 2003 and 1989. Interesting year, talk about that shortly. But if we have a look closely, we can actually see that the Moon position was very close to the Sun position at the time of both of these events. So the Sun and Moon were in conjunction at the time of the X-class solar flare and also the CME impact that arrived 25 hours later. And the next time Sun and Moon make their conjunction will be the annular solar eclipse. Now what's fascinating is that at the time of the CME, its arrival 25 hours after the X-flare, we had a series of very strong earthquakes across Southern California. So this may actually give us an indication that the San Andreas may be affected upon the reconnection of both Sun and Moon and the annual solar eclipse period, something to watch and keep close note of. We're now going to be talking about Uranus, as it will be a huge play this year in terms of geophysical events and influence, and it will begin to show its teeth in February, and it will get stronger as we progress through the middle of the year. Uranus is the seventh planet from the Sun and classified as an ice giant with a unique sideways orientation that causes extreme seasons. It has a 98-degree axial tilt, causing it to roll on its side as it orbits the Sun, which takes 84 years to complete. Uranus will be stationing direct motion and will complete its retrograde on February 4 of 2026. Its previous station where it entered retrograde was late August, early September, and interestingly, we have a very strong reflection and signature of Uranus mapped geodetically over Southern California. But I'm concerned about the previous two stations of 2024 and 2026 when we combine them. We see some very strong symmetry, and it does mark the regions of San Francisco and Seattle for a future quake, and this is the area that I'm focused upon in this video. As we move into the annual solar eclipse on February 17, just a day prior, it's important to note that the Sun will be squaring Uranus and could be activating the previous stations of Uranus around this time frame, just around the solar eclipse period and beyond into the major conjunction of Neptune and Saturn. And this will lead into the forecast covering the February 17 through 21 time frame as highly significant, with a great potential of a 7 or greater magnitude earthquake across the region of west coast of North America, with the specific zone of focus being the Uranus Station and its past footprinting, suggesting that the longitude of Seattle and San Francisco could be at risk for a quake greater than 7 magnitude. The other areas of focus will be offshore Northern California or stretching northward into Vancouver Island and Queen Charlotte Islands for this potential event. We're now going to be focusing on the annular solar eclipse taking place on February 17. It's taking place around the Antarctica Indian Ocean region, and we see its greatest point of eclipse just north of Antarctica. We're now looking at an animation of the annual solar eclipse, and we can see that the moon's shadow on the Earth extends just south of New Zealand through into Antarctica, then extends out slightly and then starts to move back and extends through the Indian Ocean and then south of Australia. So this is a very powerful solar eclipse, although it does appear to be fairly non-eventful over the ocean. But if we have a look at the antipode where the solar eclipse ends, its antipode marks the Cascadia Subduction Zone. We're now going to use Eclipse Atlas and focus on the previous eclipses, which have some strong symmetry with major earthquakes. We're going back to the 1906 earthquake, the Great San Francisco earthquake, and the solar eclipses that took place in 1903 and 1905, and note their symmetry. One in the antipode zone in 1903, and we can see a termination of the solar eclipse in 1905, a year preceding the major earthquake. Now looking back at another earthquake that struck the San Francisco region in 1868, there was a major earthquake, and it was called the Great San Francisco earthquake prior to the 1906 event. If we have a look at the 2023 solar eclipse and the 1865 solar eclipse that preceded, note their symmetry, they're almost identical. In 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake took place. A year preceding this earthquake, we had two solar eclipses. The first in March, extending right through its termination, right through the Gulf of Alaska into the Queen Charlotte Island region, while the second solar eclipse in September, just south of Australia, note its antipode, very close to the Cascadia Subduction Zone antipode. And in the year of the earthquake, 1989, there are two partial solar eclipses, also showing some interesting foreshadows to come. So it's three major earthquakes across the San Francisco region that share an interesting dynamic with solar eclipses, and the 2023 and 2026 solar eclipses could be a sign of things to come in 2026. Now February could be a touch early for this earthquake, but I do feel that 2026 could be the year for a major event across the west coast of North America. There is another area in the globe that could be affected by the solar eclipse of February of 2026, and that is the New Zealand region, as it shares a strong symmetry with past Saros branch number 121. If we look back at the previous Saros branch number 121, we go back to 1917 and 1972. The 1917 solar eclipse is very similar to the 2026 solar eclipse, where we have the moon's shadow extending just south through New Zealand. So we get a very interesting symmetry. And also, back in 1917, Neptune-Saturn made their conjunction. Now, importantly, we have some strong earthquakes associated with the 1917 and 1972 solar eclipses. 1917, we had a 7.8 magnitude earthquake around the Lake Wairarapa region, and in 1973 we had an earthquake magnitude 7 for Taramanui. If we look at the Neptune-Saturn conjunction dates a little bit more closely and cross-reference back with earthquakes across the New Zealand region, there's a very interesting dynamic and symmetry. If we go back to 1809, the Neptune-Saturn conjunction took place in the month of December, and that's the same time frame we had a very strong earthquake in the Wellington region. If we go to 1846, the next Neptune-Saturn conjunction, we had some strong earthquakes for Wellington and also Blenheim in 1848, 2 years later, magnitude 6 in Wellington, and the 7.4 magnitude earthquake in Blenheim. We go ahead to 1882. There was a strong quake in Palmerston North late in 1881, magnitude 6.7, and several notable earthquakes in 1882 across the Wellington and Nelson region, which is quite interesting. Now looking ahead at the next Neptune-Saturn conjunction of 1917, it took place in August. Interestingly, in the same month, just 3 days later, we have a 6.8 magnitude earthquake in the Wellington region. The next Neptune-Saturn conjunction, a magnitude 7.2 earthquake, struck the Bay of Plenty, another earthquake very close to the Neptune-Saturn conjunction. And in 1989, the next Neptune-Saturn conjunction, we had an 8.2 magnitude earthquake south of New Zealand in the Macquarie Ridge. So 1989, the same year, the Loma Prieta earthquake also ties us into the Neptune-Saturn conjunction. Now we have a strong convergence of the planets coming through right towards the end of February. February 26, we get the Mercury retrograde. Mars will be squaring Uranus, a very powerful connection, and then the planetary alignment geocentric involving Mercury and Venus. This is all kicking in just prior to the Moon-Jupiter conjunction, so the period towards the end of the month could also see a strong quake registered very near 7 magnitude. Now we should see an increase of earthquake activity across the New Zealand mainland through the second half of February into March, and March will be the main area of my focus for the New Zealand region, but we definitely need to watch just south of New Zealand towards the end of February, and also around the Fiji region just to the east could be at risk for a strong quake as well. But astrocartography is focusing around the Papua New Guinea region for the late part of February of 2026. That concludes this video presentation covering the February timeframe, looking and using the annular solar eclipse, the Neptune-Saturn conjunction, and a series of planetary influences involving Uranus. For more information, please visit earthsignals.com, where I'll be merging over the solarwatcher.net and quakewatcher.com websites into one place, and that'll be earthsignals.com. Thanks for watching.